Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. I'm glad you could join me today. We got an absolute insane year. I mean, 2021 has been bringing us some of the best releases I've seen in a long time. We got a new Portal coming up. We got a new Solstice coming up. I mean, I can't handle all this. So let's take a break from all this brand new madness that we're going to be getting for this year and take a look at a label that I think is truly defining the French metal underground. Yes, that's right, I said France, which is not a country that's known for a lot of metal in the international spectrum of things, but there's actually tons and tons of creative stuff coming out of there. We got a large assortment of old school death metal bands like Voorhees that I reviewed for that amazing Unsigned Showcase collaboration that I did.
Very, very nice.
I think the bands coming out of the French underground are bringing forward some super fun, creative ideas and some death metal that is really groundbreaking, and one of the catalysts for this kind of stuff is a label known as Dolorem Records, started by the man Alex Dolorem. Alex Dolorem reached out to me personally and asked me to give my thoughts on the new Creeping Fear album that came out through Dolorem Records called Hate God Triumph. Now I have to say I did love the album, so I told him that I would review everything from the label except for Creeping Fear. No, but seriously, I really recommend checking out Creeping Fear, and hopefully you will after I show you the other ensemble of bands that this label has to offer, because honestly, I'm ashamed of myself. Like, I don't know how I slept on this for so long. So I'm just gonna jump right into it. The first group we're gonna look at is a band known as Slave One, and no, that is not a Star Wars reference. I know, it's sad, but good band either way. Slave One launched right away in 2012 with an EP called Cold Obstructionist Light, and I think this EP highlights exactly what kind of sound they're going for. They have a pretty intricate and progressive sound. I can see a lot of old school influence coming out of bands like Nile on here. There's some Gorguts Obscura type sounds here as well. Really thick technical playing styles, deep menacing gutturals, and a kit that is not afraid to go all over the place. And as you just heard in that clip, Slave One does like to mix in a lot of choppy style breakdowns. I don't think this is a focal point on this EP. It is kind of gimmicky, but honestly, this does remind me of a very early like 2000s era death metal sound, maybe like Blood Red Throne or something like that. And that is topped off with a mystical, creepy vibe, so the EP itself is bare bones, but it does deliver exactly what you want, and Slave One would expand on the sound tremendously in latter releases, like we're gonna get into right now. Also, before we move on, do you guys want to hear what Rage Against the Machine would sound like if they went progressive death metal? Now let's just go ahead and fast forward to 2016 with their first ever studio-length album, Disclosed Dioptric Principles. I really hope I pronounced that right. Yes, this is Slave One's debut album, and if you thought they had weird compositions before, you ain't heard nothing yet, boy. The album is exactly what I expected the directions for Slave One to go in, but it is amazing how they're able to expand on these powerful intrinsic ideas. I'll try to dissect this thing in parts so it makes more sense. So with the last EP, we saw the choppy breakdowns mixed in with the technical and progressive death metal, but this time it's all kind of interwoven with each other, and it goes for a more progressive sound rather than just trying to be really, really fast to appear brutal. of the melodic solos and transitions that we saw in the EP are now also intertwined way better into the atmosphere of this overall album. For example, Eon Dissonance, it features a really smooth acoustic guitar for like the third of the track, and even when those distorted guitars and growls kick in, it is a slow, focused delivery that descends you into a black pit of doom. One thing I would say about this album is that the mix is a little bit off-putting at the beginning. It does kind of sound like you're listening to the band behind a wall of cardboard, which is, you know, it's a production that works for a lot of bands. It worked for this one, so I'm pretty used to it by now. It's not a big deal. But let's actually get into the meat and potatoes here. You want to hear how Slave One starts a song? Well, listen to, I don't know, Obsidian Protocol Achievement, for example. This song literally sounds like a cross between Origin and Chrysian, and after that fucking one part, Neck Hurt, I would say Disclosed Dioptric Principles is a beast of an album. It's got great rhythm and flow, excellent transitions, and the playing style got cranked up a lot. So this is surely an album to look at when you want to discuss Slave One putting their foot in the ground. Then the following year, 2017, Slave One came back with an EP titled An Abstract and Metaphysical Approach to Deceit. And if that sounds like a mouthful, wait till you hear the EP. While the full length focused more on destroying your mind with focused, slower deliveries, this EP takes it back to the original sounds of like old school Nile. You get that brutal, technical death metal fucking tone, and it is so good. Now it seems that Slave One finally changed up their lineup for this. They have a new bass player named Ben. Sick fucking stage name, dude. I'm not sure if Brent brought in something that wasn't in the band before, but this EP is absolutely relentless. I mean, every single song is about 5 to 6 minutes of Slave One trying to mindfuck you from all directions. It is fast, the double bass with the guitar chugging, it is just absolutely perfect. I'd say that an abstract and metaphysical approach to deceit is a little creepier this time around. There's some nice tremolo picking weaved in there, and it makes the atmosphere a little more denser and foreboding than we saw in previous releases. The more softer and melodic parts of Slave One's sound are put more on the back burner to focus on all of these brutal death metal elements. I wouldn't say that they're gone entirely, but when they do appear, they disappear as soon as they show up, so it's just kind of like a whisper. There are some softer interludes still though, like on Through Illuminated Void and Meditative Resonance. But the soft part just ends up leading into this, so. So yeah, the band really just went all out with this EP, and they're truly finding their voice here. I absolutely love their 2017 release, and obviously I was excited to hear the next thing, Omega Disciples, from 2020. We have finally arrived at what has been 11 years worth of evolution, because believe it or not, Slave One was actually formed in 2009. They also switched bassist again, opting for Jean Tarad to take the reins. We also have Tarvos Braduk, who got put on vocals, and he's in another band, a black metal project called Brenkelt. So with all this newfound energy and inspiration, I'm curious to see what Slave One actually did with it, and well, how do I put this? I mean, Slave One did what Slave One does best. I'm gonna read off my script for a second so you guys truly understand where I'm coming from. The first EP, catchy and brutal. The debut album, violent and foreboding. The second EP, fast as fuck and really hard to pronounce. Omega Disciples, on the other hand, is an amalgamation of all those things put together in perfect unity. The band wears their influences a lot more proudly on their sleeve this time, going for a sound akin to something Cynic might have done back in the day, or Atheist, or any number of technical or progressive death metal bands from the 90s. While there's always a theme of ancient mysticism present in their music, I wasn't actually quite sure what they were trying to get across with this album, so I did hit up Slave One's drummer, and we had a little conversation. He told me that Omega Disciples focuses on mankind's relationship between body and flesh. For example, Dissident Flesh is actually a track about Japanese monks that try to reach some kind of supreme state of consciousness by self-mutilating themselves, which, I mean, that makes sense, right? It totally makes sense. Due to the fact that there is this theme of your, I don't know, consciousness leaving your body, I would say the vocals are a lot more wretched and evil sounding. Mr. Tarvos puts a lot of effort into these black metal shrieks that appear all over Omega Disciples. And at this point, I wouldn't even be surprised if they just cranked up the dissonance even further and went for a complete esoteric sounding death and black metal sound, like something you'd find on I Voidhanger records. I think it's heading that way, to be honest. But the crushing death metal grooves have not left us, ladies and gentlemen. Oh no. So I can't say anything else about Slave One. I think I've demonstrated how incredible of an example they are of the French metal underground, and if you're trying to get into that scene, I think this band would be a great place to start. They have a new track actually called Stanzas of Dzan as we speak, so they are brewing something new. From what I can tell, the new album is going to be a lot darker than Omega Disciples, which I don't even know how that's possible, but I'm super excited for it and I can't wait for more. Next up, we have an equally strange but very much so still creative endeavor, Abyssal Ascendant. Abyssal Ascendant is a band that pushes the boundaries of space and time with an out-of-this-world sound, borrowing from metal's most extreme corners. The theme that Abyssal Ascendant likes to play around with are Lovecraftian themes, you know, cosmic horrors, destruction of man's consciousness, even though the last band dealt with it but in a different way. Jesus, metal's weird. They came out with all of their esotericism on their 2013 EP, Unleashing the Outer Plagues. I'm not gonna comment too much on this one because there's not much to say. The band kind of just went for a really old school 90s sound with a rusty, disgruntled production on top of it. There's grooves, there's things to enjoy, but honestly, compared to the later Abyssal Ascendant releases, you can look this one over. So then in 2015, the band released their first album, Chronicles of the Doomed Worlds, Part 1, Enlightenment, and it is a real trip in time because you have a lot of different styles coming together at once. The band is definitely still going for an old school vibe. We got tons of evil, cosmic tremolo picking and a devastating sound that just launches the listener into waves and waves of headbanging. The compositions themselves are very strange, but they do work for Abyssal Ascendant. I would compare them to a band like Blood Incantation. A lot of the transitions do bridge the gaps between all of the death metal groove and the spacey tones that we see on music like this. So it's a style of death metal that wasn't actually being done a lot back then. This album did come out in 2015, but I think Abyssal Ascendant absolutely nailed it. I mean, listen to a song like Interdimensional Predation 2. Similar to Slave 1, I do see a lot of Nile influence on here, and I'm talking like modern Nile where it sounds like the pyramids of Giza about to fucking fall on top of you. And although the production on here is a lot more raw, you do get that Nile sort of playing style, but then it's mixed in with a lot of the old school vibes that you see from the 90s, especially where the production and the mix is concerned. But I do like it a lot. I think it works. I mean, Teared Up in Cosmorphosis is a great song. I didn't pronounce that right. One by one. I'd say the vocals are a highlight as well. Florent does mix it up quite a bit. There's a lot of echo added in the post-production, which really complements the parts when the band mashes up all of their instruments at this harmonious descent upon your soul. Otherwise, he pays a lot of ode to guys like John Tardy, super guttural and menacing shit. And on top of all of that, the album in general just comes off extremely grand in scale. I think this band was really trying to capture the feeling of what it would be like for a human to interact with one of these cosmic entities in person. Now, I'm not sure if this is told from the perspective of a viewer or a worshiper of one of these beings, but either way, I was super excited to hear the next thing. And after that, it would be an entire 5 years since we got a new album from Abyssal Ascendant, and it came in the form of Chronicles of the Doom Worlds Part 2, Deacons of Abhorrence. I'm just gonna say right now, this is the best thing these guys ever came up with so far. I'll start with the mix. Instead of a muffled raw sound like we saw in the last album, this time it's punchy and devastating. If these guys weren't trying to be like Nile before, they definitely are now. Now, I'm not trying to say that this band is completely like ripping off Nile, because if you compare them song by song, album by album, they're not the same band, and I think that Abyssal Ascendant does try to kind of layer their music a little more with a lot of these wanky, technical transitions, whereas Niall does prefer to focus, I think anyway, on the grooves and the punchiness of the death metal. Here you get a mix of both. And when you're checking out this album, you could listen for all those little elements, or you could just take in the album as a whole. Honestly, both worked for me. But when you get into the groove of things, that's exactly it. You realize that that is what this is all about. The grooves, man. Like seriously, man, the string bending on here, okay? You got the double bass shaking the earth and the menacing, brutal delivery on the vocals. Oh my god, it just makes the sound otherworldly. The way Florin is able to carry his voice is a lot better this time too, and amongst all the evil riffing, it does add a lot. His screams sound like a strangled demon, but he does pair it up nicely with some gutturals as well. Otherwise, Abyssal Ascendant also added another guitar player, Lucien, and they don't seem to have a full-time drummer at the moment, but Mr. Krzysztof Klingben, I'm just gonna pronounce it how I know in Polish, he did a great fucking job on this record. I mean, you heard the clips, you know what they're all about. I think this is a band that still has a few things to work out personally to find their true original sound, but at the end of the day, this is an extremely enjoyable death metal experience. So yeah, Slave One, Abyssal Ascendant, similar bands, not the same, going for two different kinds of sounds, but both equally awesome. Okay, we just went into some really weird bands, so let's take it back a notch. Some very straightforward, evil-ass death metal music, and this is a band out of France called Towering. Now, Towering is a pretty young band, and they don't have a lot of material released so far, but with the little they do have, they have managed to impress me very, very much. I mean, I guess I have to touch on their 2018 promo because it was technically released through Dolorem Records. We have 2 tracks from their previous demo, as well as another song called Poison of Man. The only thing I really have to say about this promo is that it's kind of 50-50. I mean, it is only 2 songs, so you can't really expect a lot out of that. I understand the theme they're going for here, but I just think that a lot of the playing on this promo sounds really, I don't know, not in time. I'm not talking about some kind of grander concept here. Like, I literally mean the instruments are not in time. Like, they're not playing at the correct time, okay? I'm not a musician, but I know that shit when I hear it, alright? But honestly, I'm not docking too many points for that because this could be just the case of a band not sculpting their sound to their truest potential, so I want to just get right into 2019. In 2019, Towering releases their full-length debut studio album titled Obscuring Manifestation, and it is exactly what I was hoping to hear after I heard that promo. Any doubt I had about Towering is crushed because this album is a fucking demon. We're gonna start off with A Ritual of Descent, an intro track that surpasses the meaning of epic. You got tons of string bending, solo work, and a consistent foreboding tone that gets you prepared for what's about to come. Then we have once again Poison of Man, but this time revisited, remastered, rehearsed, and it sounds exactly what the song was supposed to sound like on the promo, just a non-stop death metal assault. I fucking love this song. like about Towering and this album is that they keep a consistent cryptic vibe without delving too much into the wanky territory. We just saw Abyssal Ascendant and Slave One kind of take that approach, which isn't always a bad thing, but when you strip it down and just focus on the raw evilness factor, you end up emulating bands like Belphegor, for example, which I think is just a perfect fucking band to take inspiration from. Can we all just agree on that? Austrian death and black metal for the win, boys? No? Anybody? The drumming on Obscuring Manifestation has to be mentioned. The guy's name is Mortem. That sounds familiar. And he's in two other groups called Mortis Mutilati and Hexecration Rites. I hope I pronounced that right. He doesn't just have this non-stop flow to the double bass, he uses it in very specific moments on a song, and it adds a lot of extremity to the music itself. But of course, he pairs that, he goes all over the kit with the cymbals, and the fucking fills are crazy. I mean, this guy is on some other shit, I'm telling you. Kind of reminds me of something Chapel of Disease might do back in the day. If you're into a band like that, or maybe a band like Grave Miasma or UK's Cruciamentum, I would look no further. These guys have evil riffs for fucking days, and I think Obscuring Manifestation has endless replay value, so I'd really recommend this one as well. Okay, so due to the fact that Dolorem Records is a French label, most of the bands on there are, of course, from France, but there's a few exceptions, and we're going to take a look at a group from Belgium called Storm Upon the Masses. And if that's not a literal interpretation of a band disseminating their sound to their viewers, I don't know what is. This is a literal storm upon the masses. Just listen. Now, if you know anything about Belgium, it's that they have a deep-rooted passion for a genre of music known as brutal death metal, and this band brings that full fucking force. Now, they broke out in 2015 with an EP released independently called Vengeance of Madness, which right off the bat is just not fucking around whatsoever. I'm only gonna play you one clip from this thing because I do want to get to the full length as fast as possible, but I'm gonna tell you right now, this thing is already well thought out and very, very rehearsed. I think what really makes this EP so huge is the production itself. It has this gigantuous monolith quality to it, like a tower of flesh ready to just consume you. Their sound is unforgivingly fast and treacherous, offering no mercy to anyone who dares to tread on their territory. So after that, I was actually shitting myself in excitement to check out their full-length album, The Ones Who Came Back, in 2018. Now, before we get into the tunes themselves, I do have to mention the lineup we have going on here. We have Sandra Di Carreno and Sam Phillipson, and they are both in another super badass slam death metal project called Defenestration. And then members Brett and Jurgen are also members of a band called Crawlspace. But I think Storm Upon the Masses are these guys' most brutal incarnation yet. I have never, to this day, heard a band do tremolo picking, brutal death metal style, and just everything that comes with this fucking album in such a relentless fashion. I mean, I've listened to all kinds of brutal death metal guys, okay? Norwegian bands, Indonesian bands, American bands. But holy fuck. I don't even know where to start. I mean, I can play any clip from this record and you'd know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's start off with a track like, I don't know, Storm of Rapture. Or how about one of the most accurate titles on this whole album, Skullfucked. think Storm Upon the Masses is actually doing anything too new in terms of their compositions. They do have a pretty straightforward, direct approach in destroying your psyche with all the speed and intensity that they can muster. The mix, just like on the EP, is huge. I would say even huger, and it really reminds me of an Italian band like maybe Hour of Penance. Brutal Dave, if you're watching this, you're not watching this. What the fuck am I talking about? But if you're watching this, I think you have some competition, okay? You guys need to duke it out. I want to know who's gonna win here. Now, the tracks aren't 100% sheer massive destruction at all times. There are breaks in between the madness, but they seriously do not last too long before it picks back up again. So yeah, Storm Upon the Masses, and especially their album, The Ones Who Came Back, is the best action movie equivalent that you have ever seen. I'm talking car explosions, buildings crumbling to the ground, gods descending from the heavens, a mass global pandemic that's killing millions of people. Oh wait. So if you can even survive this album, I would really recommend checking it out. I have no idea if these guys are cooking up some new material or not, but I am super pumped to hear some more shit because holy fuck, man. I mean, Belgium already, I know that is the stamp of approval for a lot of brutal death metal bands, but these guys are a highlight, and they only have one album out so far, so I think it's completely unfair that these guys are more well known. Hopefully this video brings them some attention. And they're not stopping anytime soon. As I mentioned, Slave One is cooking up new music, Abyssal Ascendant is cooking up new music. It's supposed to be really dissonant and crushing and fucking better than anything they've ever made. I swear to God, I have no idea how a band creates this incredible experience, this great musical experience, and then just makes a better one. And then a few years later, they just make a better one, and a better one. There comes a point where the palette for the listeners becomes too extreme, man. Like Van Halen's Eruption used to blow people's fucking minds. With all this music out, you can't even compare that to the same thing. They're doing that shit on a whim these days. No offense to Van Halen, I'm just saying. And since announcing that this video is gonna come out, I've actually had a few of you Frenchies hit me up personally on Facebook, which I do appreciate. Actually, a guy not long ago hit me up with this band Nervous Decay. If you guys like old school death metal, I would definitely check out Nervous Decay. But yeah, keep them coming. I mean, if you guys have a band you want to shout out, or if it's your own band, whatever, I don't care. I'm available on social media. You can always hit me up. Let me know what's going on. I may or may not make a video about it. So once again, Alex, I do have to thank you very much for hitting me up and showing me your label, Dolorem Records. I did not know about it before, and I'm super glad that I now do. Of course, as usual, all of the links to the bands and Dolorem Records are down below, as well as my own links, my family-friendly social media. It's calling out to you guys. It's calling out to you. But yeah, support the bands and stay fans while you're at it. Metal.